So this morning I'm using my last queens up that I took out the bank yesterday, which I showed you how well had hold over. I used some of them yesterday and the last 5 or 6 I'm using today, just to go through all my colonies in a last attempt to find any that had funny mated queens, or queens that weren't laying, or colonies that basically didn't have queens, because that's what happens this time of year. You have quite a few times like that when you're making 50 100 colonies. You'll always find a few that are just not being normal, or they started drone laying or something like that. So I'm just going through these colonies, and also I'm putting on extra bodies because we've got the ivy flow starting in about a week to 2 weeks, and we've not had a lot of rain yet, but there will be plenty of pollen, and I'm feeding. So because I'm feeding, I want the bees to profit from the fact I'm giving them some extra nectar, and when that flow starts from the ivy, they will then just explode. But what I'm doing is, because a lot of the inseminated queens we made were made and have been a little bit small at this time of year because they had time to get going, they now are in one box. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a second box. So this is the second box on top. The first box is fairly full of bees now. You can probably see that through there. It's fairly full of bees in the bottom there, but I'm now going to give them an extra tier or an extra section to grow up into. And because I know the ivy flow is going to be pretty prolific, and because I know these bees, there's loads of brood in that bottom box, about 5 frames of brood in there, all waiting to hatch out. I know it's a risk, but I need to get these 2 bodies stocked up for the winter, because to overwinter on the singles and the mini plus like this one as a single, or like that one as a single, it's pretty difficult because you've got to watch the food so well, and you have to put supplementary feed on top before you even start. So what I'm doing is I'm adding an extra body. Now if it was the spring and I was a bit worried, I would pull out a frame from the middle and put it up in the top, like I do with when I'm adding my 5/5s, when I'm configuring those. But this time, really it doesn't matter, because all I wanted to do is store the honey. There's no excluder here, there's just the bottom and the top, so there's basically going to be 12 frames. But for me, in this particular location, and this is what I found works, you need a minimum of 2 bodies, as I've already said. So what I've got as well is I've got frames of honey, because in preparation for the winter and preparation for building more colonies, what we do is we put this on. We have a super that goes on top of our 6-frame Nucs. That's a 6-frame Dadont Nuc. We have a super that goes on top, and it's a super that takes mini plus frames, and unfortunately they fit in perfectly going across that way. So it's absolutely brilliant. And I've got 2 of these that just happen to be here that they built. There's no brood at all in that top frame. It's open, there's no queen excluder, but they built the whole lot going up. So fortunately for me, they built it and filled it with honey. So I've got all these lovely frames to add into the top of my extra bodies that I'm putting on, to give my bees a real boost for the winter. So they haven't got to fill that now, but if they need it when they're building out this foundation, they can. If they don't need it, it stores. It stores they've got already, and it's using your resources wisely. And that's what it's all about. These bees aren't very happy today because it's like still 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's a little bit early to be in the hives, but I've got to get moving. I've got to get these all done. So I'm using my resources, I'm getting the bees ready, I'm giving them an opportunity to make the most of the last of the flow that's coming. And after that, there is nothing. At the middle of October, it's finished. First week and second week of September is the start of the ivy flow. They'll have 3 or 4 weeks, and they can be 3 or 4 exceptional weeks in terms of the flow if the bees are ready. It's like getting nectar and honey in the summer. You have to have the bees ready, otherwise there's nothing goes in the box. Well, there you go, a little bit on how I prep these for the winter. But they need to be full, otherwise you end up with dead bees like I showed you during the winter. And there's only one person to blame, and that's yourself if that happens. So that's why I'm being a bit more prepared this year. Anyway, feeder will go on top of that as well. And let's just put that on, find the plastic, which is blown off as usual while I'm talking. Here it is. So our plastic goes on there. The trouble is we're only one-handed and it's windy, it's never easy. Then on goes our aluminium, and that's the kind of form of insulation like I've talked about before. It helps reflect any heat down and sort of stabilizes the whole thing. And then we have a piece of wood. Now the piece of wood pushes on the edges, so the plastic actually makes contact with the top of the poly nuc, and it's a really good finish then. And then obviously the top for the feeder, and then our lid, but I'll fill the feeder up in a minute. But that's what it's all about. It's going through each colony now, getting your mite treatments in, looking at what provisions they've got, assessing the colony, and making a decision about how you're going to manage that colony for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and give it that ability to get it through the winter, because they will do it themselves. You just set it up right for them. Like all this stuff, you just set it up right for them, and they'll do it themselves. But you have to give them that chance. You can't just assume they're going to do it on their own, because don't forget, we've abused these colonies all year. We have taken things from them, we've taken resources from them, and in the wild they would probably have a colony that would almost be 5 or 6 boxes tall full of honey and bees, or they would have swarmed and made a new colony. But they haven't. We have taken advantage of these bees, because we put them in that box to do that, and now we have to make sure they have everything they need to get ready for the winter. So, busier day today, lots to do. Have a good one. Cheers for now.